What's up, everyone? Welcome to the video. We are here breaking down week 15 of the NFL season on DraftKings and FanDuel. And if this is your first time here, what's up? My name is Pennell. I break down NASCAR and NFL DFS each and every single week on this channel. And in these videos specifically, what I like to do is go position by position, showing my player pool as of right now on Friday afternoon. So obviously, things can change by the time kickoff rolls around on Sunday. So make sure you keep up to date on the news that happens throughout the week. We'll put a lineup as we progress through it, more so for a single entry tournament build. Then I'll run my optimizer, which did just get some fresh updates to it at the end of this video to see who's popping the most as of right now with the projections and ownership that I have currently set in place. And if you would like the updated versions of that, link is down below in the description. And as always, we will start with the quarterback position. I do have to mention, if you want access to the sheets, the projections, cheat sheets, optimizer, ownership projections, Discord community, all that fun stuff, link down below in the description or in the pinned comment. I do cover the NBA each and every single day in a similar fashion. But anyway, let's get into these quarterbacks. So we only have a 10-game slate. So similar to last week, we're not going to have a ton of options, but there's a few good spots that I'm certainly looking to target. And I think we have a good array of options at quarterback, whether you want to be expensive this week, go in the middle, or save a little bit of cash. So we'll start with the two studs up top, the two MVP favorites, although it looks like Jalen Hurts has now surpassed Patrick Mahomes, which I still think Mahomes should be the MVP. I'm hoping he can. I'm a bit of a Mahomes fan, if you haven't been able to tell. I'm hoping he can win the MVP, although Jalen Hurts, not to take anything away from him, he has been absolutely incredible. Both these guys are, they're the two clear-cut favorites at this point. Tua's tanked, Josh Allen's tanked. Joe Burrow has rose up a little bit, but I don't think he's on Mahomes or Hurts level this year. So we'll see who gets it. Really just going to depend on who finishes the year stronger these next few weeks. But anyway, let's start with Jalen Hurts here, $8,200. He's been nothing short of incredible. Great through the air, great on the ground, which gives him that high floor, high ceiling combination. We get a fantastic matchup versus the Chicago Bears, 9-point favorites on the road in Chicago, and your 29-point implied team total here. And as you can see, well, the numbers aren't as high as Patrick Mahomes through the air. He's been very solid in recent weeks, but what he does on the ground can really separate him from the pack. Over 50 rushing yards per game, over 8 designed runs, that's not including scrambles, and close to 1 rushing touchdown per game. So you're kind of getting 2 players in one. You're getting like a QB2, QB1 hybrid mixed in with like a RB1, RB2 upside every single week from Jalen Hurts and the Bears. 31st DVA versus the pass, and they're pretty bad versus the run as well, which is obviously important for Hurts' potential because, of what he can do on the ground with his legs. So yeah, I'm liking Jalen Hurts. If I'm playing him in cash games, I have no problem with that. Super safe, but it's really just a coin flip between him or Patrick Mahomes right now. I would say Hurts might have the safer floor because Mahomes does draw a matchup where the Texans are allowing the fewest points per game into the quarterback position, but you have to keep in mind, just because they're so bad on the ground, teams can just pound it and they get a lead and they don't really have to do too much damage in the second half. So it's kind of why it's leading to less points per game to quarterbacks. It's still a beatable defense, obviously, and I don't care about matchups when it comes to Patrick Mahomes anyway, but they have the highest implied team total in the slate. They're 2 touchdown favorites here on the road in Houston in the Dome, so we don't have any weather to be concerned about. And hard to find a better guy through the air this season than Mahomes. 320 passing yards per game, over 2.5 passing touchdowns, 8.2 yards per attempt. Did throw 3 picks last week, which is unlike him, but outside of that, he's been pretty phenomenal this year, and he does offer you a little bit of rushing upside. It seems like he has been running him more in recent weeks, over 20 rushing yards per game, but obviously not quite on Jalen Hurts' level by any means. And like I said, I already talked about the matchup here, but I have zero concerns about that. They're still bottom half in the league DVA-wise versus the pass, and really it's just a coin flip here. I think Hurts has a bit of a safer floor here, but in tournaments, I'm going to probably side with Patrick Mahomes if he's going to have slightly lower ownership. I had to check what I have on the optimizer, but I do think it's very close. But really for me, coin flip, Hurts probably just a tad safer just because of the rushing upside. Then we get into 2 of my favorite tournament plays here. We have Justin Herbert, $7,200. I like him a lot. Great matchup versus Tennessee through the air. They have a very stout run defense, very hard to run on these guys, but they can get shredded through the air. We saw that last week with Trevor Lawrence and Zay Jones and Christian Kirk, Evan Ingram. They tore that defense up. They were dealing with a lot of injuries as well, but I am liking Herbert here. It's a very cheap stack because if you look at Mike Williams, Keenan Allen, they're both in the 6K range. You have Justin Herbert in the 7K range. You can run it back with a guy like Derrick Henry. I think that's totally fine because he's in a great matchup versus that Chargers run defense. So this is looking like arguably my favorite stack of the week. Chargers will throw the ball quite a bit, nearly 300 passing yards per game for Justin Herbert. Looked absolutely exceptional versus the Miami Dolphins last, was it Sunday night, I believe? I think it was the Sunday night game. But as you can see, the Titans give up the second most points per game in the quarterback position, nearly 300 passing yards per game, and 28 DV8 versus the pass. And I can't really see the game plan being being a running game for the Chargers. So liking Herbert a lot, and the stacks are cheap. Then we have Dak Prescott. If you need to save some money, $6,200, 4.5 point favorites, 26 point implied team total for the Jags versus the Jags, I should say, on the road here. And it's pretty easy to stack up. You use Dak Prescott, use Dalton Schultz, who's in the 4K range. You have CeeDee Lamb's in the 7K range. Pretty easy stack there. Running back with a guy like Christian Kirk or Travis Etienne even. You could also throw in Evan Ingram or Zay Jones if you would like, but very easy to stack this game up, and it's only a point lower, the over-under, for the Eagles game and the Chiefs game. It's also a point higher than this Chargers game, which I have a lot of interest in. So I think with the Cowboys being on the road, the defense didn't look as sharp last week versus Houston. This has some sneaky shootout potential. That's definitely want to get some exposure in tournaments. And if anyone cares, the match was pretty good. Jags are 30th DVA versus the pass and 26th versus fantasy quarterbacks. And moving over to our lineup of the 4 guys we talked about, we're going to roll Justin Herbert for this build. Again, I have no problem with any of the 4. But for this specifically, we'll roll with the Chargers. And moving on to the running backs, we actually have a long list of viable guys. I wouldn't say this is the best running back week out there, but I mean, really at any price range, I think we have a guy that would be worth playing. So up top, upper echelon tier, we have Josh Jacobs and Derrick Henry. I like both these guys, although if I had to choose one, I think I will side with Derrick Henry here. I like this game environment just a little bit better. I love the matchup versus the Chargers. Their run defense has been absolutely horrid so far this season. And Jacobs draws a pretty tough draw versus that New England Patriots defense, who's been very stingy on the ground this year, only allowing 80 rushing yards per game, barely any rushing touchdowns whatsoever, which I know can be very, very fluky as far as touchdowns are concerned, but it's just been the way it has been so far this year. They do have a pretty solid run defense. So I know Josh Jacobs, he's been pretty much the best back in the NFL this year, especially for fantasy points wise. But a little bit more involved in the passing game, getting over 100 yards per game this year, finding the end zone a lot, very efficient, 5.2 yards per carry, just getting a ton of work. Both these guys are bell cows. I just prefer the matchup a little bit more with Derrick Henry. As you can see, the Chargers, 5th most points per game at the running back position, nearly 130 rushing yards per game, and just like the game environment a little bit better, and I like his chance of finding the end zone. So fine with both, but if I had to choose one, I will go with Derrick Henry. Now going into the mid-range, we have a lot of options here. We'll start with James Conner, $6,900. So obviously Kyler Murray's out, gets to enjoy his time playing Warzone. Lucky guy, getting paid a lot of money to do just that. But James Conner here, I mean, the Cardinals with Colt McCoy, he's probably just going to dump it off a lot to Conner. We saw that in the primetime game once Murray went down on the first drive. And as long as Conner finds the end zone, I think he's going to be a very solid play here, sub 7K. We should see 5+ targets and probably going to get you 15+ carries on the ground. So while the matchup, I guess, isn't amazing versus Denver, it's kind of just middle of the road, 17th DVA versus the run, 18th versus fantasy running backs. But they have been allowing a decent amount of catches pre-game to running backs, which, you know, kind of right up James Conner's wheelhouse. So I like him for that. I wouldn't say he's an exciting play, but he's there. Alvin Kamara, $6,800, a much more talented version of James Conner, a little bit cheaper, good matchup versus Atlanta. He has been very up or down this year, but if you can catch a ceiling game from Alvin Kamara, he can certainly break a slate. It's a good spot versus Atlanta, 28th DV versus the run, and just overall not a very good defense in general. They're terrible versus the pass. Versus the run, it's not much better. And with Kamara, you have a decent floor just because of what he can do through the air. But like I said, he's been very up or down this year, but you are getting him at a pretty fair price point. I think it's $6,800. Maybe I wish he was a little bit cheaper just because of, you know, how volatile he's been this year. But with his ceiling potential, I think it's worth it in tournament lineups, but I don't think I'd get there in cash games. Miles Sanders, another guy that I think is okay for tournaments. Not sure I could play him in cash games, but it's a perfect setup here. They're 9-point favorites. They're facing Chicago. High implied team total. I think there's a decent chance he gets into the end zone, and been pretty solid this year. Over 5 yards per carry, nearly a rushing touchdown per game, over 80 rushing yards, and this is obviously the best running team in the league. They'll run the ball down your throats every single play if they can. And the Bears, awful versus the run. 5th most points allowed per game to the running back position, and also 29th DVOA, so I think Sanders is fine for tournaments. Etienne's also fine for tournaments. He's had a couple poor performances in a row, then got hurt the one game. So it hasn't been fun times for Travis Etienne, even though he had that hot stretch after a while. Once they got rid of James Robinson, he was the only back, and he was absolutely killing it. But I think this game, like I said, some sneaky shootout potential here. So just to try to get some more exposure to it, and hopefully the Cowboys defense, if you are playing the Jags, looks like they did last week versus Houston. Isaiah Pacheco, the rookie, $5,900, pretty much a dream setup here versus the Houston Texans. High implied team total, highest of the week. They're 2 touchdown favorites, and we've seen the usage go way up over the past month now. We got a couple of targets. Now, obviously, Jerick McKinnon is the main pass catching back, housed like a 50 or 60 yard touchdown last week off a really nice Patrick Mahomes flip there. While he was running, it looked like he was going to run out of bounds, then just flipped it over to McKinnon, and he took it all the way. But Pacheco here, I mean, great spot. The main running back here, obviously running back, but doesn't really get too involved in the passing game. He has seen a couple targets here and there in recent weeks, but dream matchup versus Houston, absolutely getting crushed on the ground. I say every single week, so I'm not going to repeat it. But yeah, Pacheco's in a very good spot, obviously. The one problem with him is, though, if he doesn't score a touchdown, your ceiling is like around 13 points, because him getting 100 yards on the ground is a pretty good day, and then you get the bonus, so it's like 13 points. If you do not find the end zone, just know that he's probably not going to offer you too much as far as pass catching is concerned, especially with them being 2 touchdown favorites. I can't imagine we'll also have to check it down too much to Pacheco. Damian Harris is here in case Ramondre Stevenson misses, because if he is out, which it looks like he is going to be because he has not yet practiced this week, although Damian Harris has been getting in some work. So if he's good to go and there's no Stevenson, he'll be the main back here, and it's a good spot versus the Raiders. Zon of a night, Bam night, whatever you want to call him. He's the main back for the New York Jets now, $5,300. Mike White is out, which does suck because I like him running the offense because Zach Wilson is just a disaster. So unfortunately, it is Zach Wilson this week, which just hurt the offense in general. It hurts Garrett Wilson the most, but I think we can still play Knight here. If he can get us 15 plus touches at this price point and a pretty solid matchup, I will take it all day. Then Latavius Murray at $5,100. I hate playing Latavius Murray as much as you do, but this is about as good of a spot as we can get probably for the price point, just because Mike Boone returned. Oh, he returned the week prior, but then he got hurt again, so he's back on the IR. So it's basically him and Marlon Mack. I know Marlon Mack had that 60-yard touchdown off of, was it a screen, I believe, or it was something. Obviously, that's probably not going to happen ever again. So it's pretty much the Latavius Murray show. I'm sure we'll see Mack sprinkled in, but with no Mike Boone, no Javonte Williams, not many other touches to go around here. And with the Broncos, who also have a backup quarterback, they're facing another backup quarterback. So we kind of got lucky there. So they should be able to run the ball as much as they want, just because I don't think they're going to air it out with Brett Ripien, however you pronounce that. And there's also no Cortland Sutton, also no Kendall Hinton. So yeah, you're running out of options quickly, and it's a decent matchup on the ground for the Denver Broncos. So if you're just looking for a cheap play, if he barrels into the end zone, you'll probably be pretty happy with the output. And moving back over to our build, we had a laundry list of running backs to choose from, but I think I'm going to use Derrick Henry as the run back option. And I say that because usually it's a wide receiver for me or a tight end, but I'm going to go with the running back, which it can work. I've done it before. And it would have worked last week if you did it with Jacksonville and the Tennessee Titans as well. But we're going to plug in Henry because I think we're going to be able to afford at least one expensive running back because our stack's not overly expensive. But I do want to kind of balance it out by going nearly all the way down here and plugging in Zon of a night at $5,300, just like the usage we've seen. And I mean, it's just a really cheap running back and a decent matchup versus the Detroit Lions, which their defense can be pretty shaky, but their offense can put up some points, although more so at home on the road. But I'm just taking cheap touches here for the most part. And moving on to the pass catchers, we'll try to keep this as simple as possible. You look at your quarterback, you pair them up with the correlating wide receivers, or run them back with the guy from the opposing team. A lot of the time, you don't always have to do that. But I do think it's a bit of a waste of time. Getting into the nitty gritty, looking at individual matchups, how many times is the guy going to be covered by this corner? I think it's a bit of a waste. Sometimes, yeah, I'll avoid certain guys. I don't want to play guys against Sauce Gardner. And there's a couple of other corners out there that are obviously very good that I don't try to target unless it's just part of a stack or it's a showdown slate. But anyway, Jamar Chase, I did not have Joe Burrow on here, but I do think he's a fine one-off. And I was tempted to put Burrow on here. It's a decent game to stack. Go with the Burrow, Jamar Chase. Run it back with a guy like Godwin or maybe even a Fournette, whatever you want to do. But it looks like as of right now, T. Higgins and Tyler Boyd are questionable. If they happen to miss again, Jamar Chase could get nearly 20 targets in this game, from being honest. The upside's always there. I don't care if they play anyway. I like Jamar Chase either way. So fine play for me, but not really going to stack this game up too much, just as a fine one-off if you have the money for it. CeeDee Lamb, if you are using Dak Prescott, he's the obvious pairing option there. I do like the price point versus Jacksonville. It's been a very beatable pass defense this season. And let me pull up the target numbers because it's obviously a little bit more important for you guys. Now, Keenan Allen, Mike Williams, I love the price points on these guys. And in our lineup that we're building right now, I have Justin Herbert. So obviously I'm very interested in these two because I got to pair up Herbert with somebody because he's not going to get there by himself. So yeah, Allen and Mike Williams will be the two top options there. Both guys were great versus Miami. Williams returning from injury. Thankfully did not get hurt. And we know the upside for Mike Williams when he is healthy. Can always break a slate. And $6,300 is a bit of a joke, I think, as far as pricing is concerned. And if we put up the matchup, how the Tennessee Titans have been versus wide receivers this year, it's pretty much as good as it gets. They're allowing the most points per game versus the position, 28th DVA versus the pass, and nearly 200 receiving yards per game to wide receivers. So yeah, sign me up for Big Mike and Keenan Allen. Love both these guys. Chris Olave, $6,500, gets a pretty good matchup here versus Atlanta. They've allowed the 6th most points per game to the wide receiver position, and they're also 29th DVA versus the pass. And really not many other options for the ball to go to from Andy Dalton besides him and Alvin Kamara. Yes, you have some stragglers out there, but Olave, obviously, he's been great air yards wise this year. Plenty of upside. $6,500, good price point, but I do prefer the Chargers group here, especially since I have Justin Herbert at quarterback, but he's a fun one-off because I am not using Andy Dalton. I'm not stacking the Falcons either. So as I always say, yeah, I'm trying to correlate my lineups with my quarterbacks and wide receivers and things like that. But some guys are fine as one-offs because if you're playing Olave, I don't think you have to force a guy like Andy Dalton. And Garrett Wilson kind of got neutered with the news that Zach Wilson is now starting. If Mike White was the quarterback, I think Garrett Wilson was going to be my favorite wide receiver of the week. 6K is just way too cheap. He hits his over on his prop every single week on Prize Picks. That's been free money for a long time now. But yeah, Zach Wilson's back, and while Wilson has had a few good games yardage-wise with Zach Wilson at quarterback, it's just a big step down from Mike White, who's just willing to trust the ball in Garrett Wilson's hands and get it to him quite often. But Beetle matchup versus Detroit, it's just, I think expectations have to be tempered now with the news that Zach Wilson is a quarterback. Juju Smith-Schuster, if you're looking to stack with Patrick Mahomes, he's the top receiving option. Although the problem with using a wide receiver with Mahomes is that it could be anybody every week. I mean, it could be Juju, it could be Valdez-Scantling, it could be Sky Moore, Justin Watson. You just never really know. Zay Jones, fine run back option if you are going with that Dak Prescott, CeeDee Lamb stack. Do like the price point there, a little bit cheaper than Christian Kirk, and they do get similar amounts of targets. And then Chris Moore, I kind of skipped over Brandon Cooks, but both these guys are viable. But as of right now, we do not know if Brandon Cooks is going to play. He did return to practice. The coach said he looked fast, which I guess it means he's trending in the right direction. But if Brandon Cooks happens to miss, Chris Moore would be a cash game lock for me at $4,200. Had a huge game last week, and they're 14-point dogs facing Kansas City. No weather to be concerned about in the Dome. Kansas City's been pretty bad versus wide receivers so far this season. Actually allowing the 4th most points per game, and actually a lot of touchdowns specifically to wide receivers. I know the numbers suck here, but I mean, it's the Texans offense. It's not pretty, but they're going to be throwing the ball quite often because they're just not going to be able to keep up with the Chiefs. If Cooks plays, $4,100, it's not bad. It's tough to trust him because it just seems like he's quit on that team. But I mean, the usage will certainly be there, and he's more talented than Chris Moore. There's no denying that. They're both cheap, but we'll have to wait on injury news as the week progresses. And moving back over to our lineup. So like I mentioned, we have Justin Herbert, so we're going to have to pair him with his wide receivers. Obviously, you could look at Gerald Everett if you wanted. And Austin Eckler's fine too because, you know, Austin Eckler gets a ton of targets every single week. But I prefer the wide receivers here. So we're going to plug in Keenan. We're going to plug in Mike Williams. And normally this is where I'd grab my Tennessee Titans wide receiver, just using them as an example because that's the stack. But since we have Derrick Henry, I'm okay with that. Like, if you kind of view this as where the Titans just run the ball down the Chargers' throat, which I know kind of sucks game flow-wise because they could just suck the clock out of this game, which, I mean, that's what the Titans are going to try to do. But if Henry can get us 100-plus yards, 2 touchdowns, and the Chargers find themselves having to keep up all game with that, I mean, that sets up perfectly for me. So after all that, we have $4,100 left for wide receiver 3, tight end, flex, and defense. And once you factor in cheap defense, I think we're sitting pretty, and I don't think we'll actually need a pump play. And talking tight ends here, I don't know what you want me to say. I mean, if your name is not Travis Kelce, you were bad. So it's really about all it is. Dalton Schultz has had his spurts of good games. Actually played well last week. But yeah, Kelce, I mean, if you have Patrick Mahomes, he's the clear-cut stacking option. I know the past 2 games for Kelce haven't been great, but still, I mean, it's just not even close. Him and the next tight end, I think it's like, in PPR, it's like over 100 points this year. Like, so yeah, if you can afford Kelce, go for it. Don't care what the matchup says. I'm not even going to look. Not even gonna look. But I think Dalton Schultz scored 1 or 2 touchdowns last week versus them, if I remember correctly. I hope I'm not just making that up, but I'm pretty sure that's what happened. Dalton Schultz, $4,400. Speaking of him, if you are looking to stack with Dak and you want to get somebody else besides CeeDee Lamb, sure, you could look at Michael Gallup if you want. You could look at Noah Brown, but I like Dalton Schultz there at the tight end position by half the price as Kelsey. Not trying to compare the two. He's probably about half the player Kelsey is anyway, but he's fine. I mean, you got the chance for the touchdown, 18% target share, or 5 targets per game. Both teams play at a pretty fast pace on the road in Jacksonville. Should be back and forth, and I like the upside for him. I mean, for $4,400, it feels like a safe price point. I think Schultz would probably be in the 5K range, so I think we're getting a little bit of value there. Then Cole Kmet at $4,000. He's on here just because I didn't want to, because it just didn't seem like enough. But he's my 3rd highest projected owned tight end of the week, and nearly 4 targets per game, close to 3 catches. If you're playing him, you're just kind of hoping for a touchdown, because if he does not get into the end zone, it's probably not going to work out. And moving over to the defenses, as I always say, let's scroll all the way down and look at our first viable defense. And tell you right now, the Broncos probably going to be the chalk there. They're facing a backup quarterback. They're playing at home in Mile High. 17-point implied team total against them. 2.5-point favorites. Lowest total of the week. 2 backup quarterbacks in this game. Yeah, they're looking like the top option here. So the Broncos are going to be your cash game defense this week. Looking at other viable defenses, I guess you could play. Patriots aren't too bad as a pivot if you're trying to get off the chalk in tournaments. Panthers versus Pittsburgh. That's a pretty low implied team total. That game's only got a 38.5 over under. Cardinals, fine, but I mean, I don't really think this should be nearly $1,000 more than the Broncos. So yeah, I mean, for me, it's Broncos, Panthers. It's probably my 2 favorites there. Cardinals, I guess, if you want to, but it just feels like I'm spending a little bit too much there. You can see it very good. So we got, 4 spots left. Let me plug in a cheap defense to see what we have to work with. $2,700 Broncos. That seems to be my favorite on the weekend. We have just over $4,500 left. Gotta get a tight end in. We can't fit Kelsey, because if I try to jam him in, we're at $2,950, which I guess you could if you played a min-price tight end, but it's just not the route I want to go. So the next best bet for me would be Dalton Schultz here at $4,400. That looks a little bit better, just under 5K left, which I know there's some decent players in there for around $5,000. Since we have the Broncos defense, I don't mind correlating that with Latavius Murray. And he's $5,100. So it definitely fits in the price range we are looking at. So yeah, Latavius Murray, $5,100. Get a little bit of correlation there with the Broncos defense. That leaves us $4,200 left for the last spot, which Hartman's in IR still. Yeah, Chris Moore, $4,200. And Brandon Cooks happened to be out, which it looks like he's trending towards playing, which kind of sucks. But if he's out, I mean, Moore is pretty much a cash game lock for me. But I still think we can play him here. I mean, the Texans are going to get killed in this game more than likely. And 11 targets last week, caught 10 of them for over 100 yards. Didn't get to the end zone, almost did. 25.4 points versus Dallas. Even if Cooks plays, I mean, if we can get like 5-6 targets out of Chris Moore at $4,200, it's not bad. So this lineup, I think, looks pretty solid. You got Herbert paired with Allen, Mike Williams, Ram back with Derrick Henry. You have Bam Knight there just because he's cheap. We have Chris Moore because he fit. Dalton Schultz just because he's a fairly priced tight end and we can't afford Kelsey. Latavius Murray paired with the Broncos defense. Doesn't look too bad. Now, please don't copy and paste this. I build several lineups throughout the weekend. It's only Friday. I'm recording this video a day earlier just because we have the Saturday slate and I wanted to get this up. So make sure you use your own judgment. Don't copy and paste something you see on YouTube. And like I mentioned, I did want to run the optimizer at the end to see who is popping as of right now. And I did get a fresh update on this, so it looks a little bit more appealing on the eyes, and just the UI is a little bit more user-friendly and a couple of other things. So if you want access to this to build your own lineups, things like that, links down below in the description and the pinned comment. Also one for the NBA and then NASCAR and baseball once those seasons start back up again. So I already ran the 150 while we were talking through everything else, so we can go right to the builds here. And let me open up the players tab to see exactly who. So yeah, that's a lot of Josh Jacobs, Latavius Murray. I'm surprised it likes Garrett Wilson as much as it does, even with Zach Wilson in a quarterback. I might have to manually bump that down. Obviously, if you are someone that does build 150 lineups seriously, or 20 max, whatever, make sure you have your right settings in, and probably don't want to lock players. Definitely want to set the exposure, and you can do that in the settings, and make sure you have build rules with run back options and stacks and things like that. But I mean, it's got everyone we talked about, really. Josh Jacobs, Latavius Murray, Wilson, Mahomes, Schultz, Zay Jones, ETN. Not really surprised at who is popping right now. But I really am surprised it's that much Garrett Wilson even with Zach Wilson at quarterback. Maybe I will bump that down manually because it just seems like it's a bit too much. I'm pulling up the teams tab. Denver's getting jammed in. KC, the Jets, Jaguars, Vegas, Dallas. So yeah, I mean, I'm not really too surprised with this. Now, obviously, a lot of these are jammed up because some players are just getting put in every single lineup, but definitely have to play around with it. And just if you have any questions about it, because if you do have access to it, let me know and I'd be more than happy to help you out. With that being said, that's all I got for you guys this week. I hope you did enjoy, and if you did, leave a like down below. Subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet done so. We wish you all the best of luck, and I'll see you all next time.